Today marks the 10th anniversary of this channel, and it's absolutely wild to think that I've been making about 2 videos a week for a decade. Man, in that time, we've seen a lot of change in the Linux gaming world, but I've also seen a lot of change in my life, and I think that it's time that we make a change here on this channel too. Before we get to that, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to tell you a story. I've always been a gamer. I grew up with an NES, a Super Nintendo, an N64, and a PlayStation. And as I reached my teenage years, the Xbox was my go-to. However, for as long as I can remember, the PC dwarfed the consoles. Duke Nukem, Doom, Command & Conquer, Unreal Tournament, Age of Empires, SimCity 3000, The Sims, the list goes on and on. My family wasn't well off though, so if I wanted a PC, I had to work for it. I spent an entire summer mowing lawns and selling Pokemon cards so that I could get a PC, and I'm not kidding. My aunt sold me her old Gateway 2000 for $100, and it came with a monitor, a keyboard and mouse, and I kept it in my bedroom. I then ran a phone line to my room so that I could dial up to the net. In retrospect, a 10 or 12-year-old kid with an unsupervised internet connection in their bedroom was probably a bad idea, but you know what, I thought it was cool at the time. At the age of 14, I started to dabble with Linux. My first distro was Fedora Core, maybe 5 or 6, but then I quickly switched over to Ubuntu, and Ubuntu was my home for over a decade. At the time, I was going to school to be an electrician, but I knew that wasn't where my passion lay. I had wanted to sign up for the computer careers course, but it was full, so I had to do something else with my time as a homeschooler. So I ended up taking the electrical course and filled out the final semester by doing odd electrical jobs at the school, for the school, and I made a decent amount of money doing it too. I was able to buy an ATI Radeon card secondhand from my uncle, and I wish for the life of me that I could remember the model of that card, but I can't. But no matter, it unlocked a whole new level of gaming for me. I mean, Call of Duty, Halo CE, Unreal Tournament 2004, Max Payne 2, Black and White 2, so much more. It was probably around 2008 when I became a full-time Linux user. My daily driver distro was Ubuntu Jaunty, and it literally changed my life. I remember upgrading from Jaunty to Karmic and being so impressed that my computer actually got faster after an upgrade that I immediately started to evangelize the virtues of Linux to anyone that would listen. I installed it on my friend's PC for them, and they noticed immediately how much more responsive the mouse cursor felt on Ubuntu than it did on Windows, and I couldn't agree more. But there was one thing missing: video games. When Ubuntu Lucid dropped in 2010, I was really starting to feel the lack of games in my PC using habits. I was messing around with Minecraft, sure, and a few other things at that point, but it was never really the same. I was used to having a variety of PC games on my desktop, and while I was dipping into the collection of boxed PC games that I had and running them through Wine, games like Modern Warfare and Halo CE, and while I was also pirating some old Linux ports of like SimCity 3000, the sad truth was I was turning to my Xbox 360 for most of my gaming needs at this point. I was playing games like the XBLA release of Perfect Dark, Braid, Bastion, Rock Band 2, Splinter Cell Conviction, and whatever Assassin's Creed game was new and shiny at the time. Heck, I was even playing like Left 4 Dead 2 on the 360, and that is a sad state of affairs to be sure. But then I caught wind of something. Humble Bundle. Pay what you want and support charity, and every game has a Linux port?
The Humble Indie Bundle. It's pay what you want, so please be nice. Remember us indies when you name your price. The games are all DRM free, compatible with Mac, Linux, and PC. No corporate middleman is taking a fee, and buying the bundle helps charity.
Yes, please. So I bought every Humble Bundle religiously. It was the best way to get fresh and interesting games on Linux, and I was absolutely sold. And then Valve did something cool. They announced that Steam was coming to Linux. And oh man, I was absolutely stoked. I hopped on that bandwagon immediately. I redeemed every single Humble Bundle key that I had received, and only maybe 20% of them had actual Linux builds available on Steam. It didn't matter. I mean, I quickly beat every game that I had in my library. Braid and Bastion were the top tiers at that point. And I bought myself actually this DualShock controller here, this DualShock 4. You can tell it's old because, I mean, it's like got the deteriorated thumbstick here. And I used that controller to beat these games over and over again. And then a little bit later, I remember taking a break one day at work and checking my phone. The r/Linux gaming subreddit was all abuzz with the news of Valve's Steam Machines project. Valve had announced SteamOS, then based on Debian, and their program for OEMs to install their gaming-focused OS on pre-built machines meant for your living room. It was wild, and it was exciting, if a bit half-baked. And it was half-baked because Valve had yet to roll out Proton. That was still like 4 years away, believe it or not. And the lack of compatibility with Windows titles, well, that was a major snag for the adoption of SteamOS, and it was one of the primary reasons that Steam Machines failed. Now, you've got to remember that this was Valve's crowdsource everything era. They didn't want to take risks or responsibility for anything at this point. I mean, this was back when Steam Greenlight was still like a big thing. Remember that disaster? Now, to Steam Machines' credit, there were actual PC vendors who bought into the idea. Falcon Northwest and Zotac come to mind. But the original one, the flagship, was the Alienware Steam Machine. I wish I still had one of these. I followed the news and I paid close attention. This was the future, after all. I was certain of it. But delay after delay and the confusing, muddled catalog of hardware was truly disheartening. It was late 2014, and I'd been a Linux gamer for many years at this point, and the landscape had changed dramatically in that time. But things were also changing in my life. At the time, I had gotten a job at a furniture store in their warehouse. I had a lot of extra free time since my commute had gone from over an hour and a half a day to just under 10 minutes. So I wanted to use my time wisely. Now, Valve had just rolled out the Steam Curator program, and thousands of people had followed the one that I had spun up. It was called the Linux Gamer, and I had drawn a purple pixel art penguin as the mascot. I had always wanted to have a YouTube channel, and I tried and failed many times to start one too. So, driven by my desire to help people with gaming and to review video games, because, I like video games, I created this channel, then called the Linux Gamer on YouTube, on September 28th, 2014. My first video was a review of a random PC port of a mobile game just to get my feet wet. It was called Beyond Gravity. You can still watch it here on this channel today. Going back though and watching it, it's kinda hard for me. The art style is clean and modern, reminding me of other 2D Unity Engine games. The sound your character makes as he lands safely on a planetoid is satisfying, and collecting screws and cogs hits those pleasure points as well. I've really tried hard to have a more natural performance since that time, but I don't know how much I've improved with that. Back then, I didn't know much about capturing footage on Linux, so I used Steam's in-home streaming to stream gameplay from my Linux laptop to a Windows PC running Fraps. Yes, that's really how I started. That solution sucked though, so I quickly found alternatives. Like I said, I had tried to start multiple YouTube channels in the past, but they were all terrible. And this was different, and I could feel it. Thousands of views and subscribers in just a few short months. So, flash forward. I've been playing the YouTube game for 10 years now. I've witnessed firsthand the incredible growth and change in the Linux world. Together, we have watched Linux gaming mature from a small corner of Steam to the release of Proton to today, where we've seen massive mainstream adoption of a Linux gaming handheld. And this little hobby project that I started here in 2014, over 10 years ago, has grown too. It's opened many doors for me, and I've made so many friends and connections. I've grown as a person, as a creative, and as a Linux user. Now, I wouldn't have been able to start my company or publish my video game if it weren't for this channel. I wouldn't have been able to support myself through the pandemic, nor would I have been able to afford this house. Because of that, I am so grateful for the millions of people who have tuned into this show since its inception. So now, 10 years after the creation of this channel, I need to make a change. See, I got into this business to help people, plain and simple. It started off with video game reviews, and it has evolved over the years. And when I have fallen away from that ethos, you guys have been disinterested. So it seems like something needs to change. Now, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be creating these videos for you every week. But I have learned quite a bit about what works and what doesn't here on YouTube. Now, if you don't like YouTube, you can check out these videos on Subscribe to Me, which is one of my websites that I run. It's a PeerTube instance, and it's peered with a bunch of other cool content creators. So if you want to check that out, you can head over to subscribe2.me. There's a link in the description. So the plan is we want to focus on what works. More tutorial style content, more focus on Linux content. And definitely you guys seem to really enjoy the Linux gaming news videos, so more of that. But the biggest change that I'm going to make is that I'm never going to do a sponsored segment or what we call integration again. You know what I'm talking about. I want to say thanks to this video's sponsor, Brand X. Brand X makes shopping easy by... Yeah, I'm giving up on those completely. Firstly, because they're usually irrelevant to the video that I'm making or the topic I'm talking about. Secondly, because they interrupt the flow of the video. But thirdly, because I frankly hate making them. They're boring, and that's not the kind of thing that I want to do. And making integrations are never fun, and my ADHD makes doing integrations like pulling teeth, but they're also rarely helpful to the audience. Now, from my end, I'm almost never dealing with the brand directly. It's usually influencer agencies who have all these ridiculous demands, and they're almost never worth the amount of work that goes into making them or the annoying crap that you have to deal with that goes along with it. But from your perspective, it's boring and worse yet, irrelevant, as evidenced by the 90% of people who always skip these ads. And that has a negative knock-on effect to the video's performance, but also future videos on the channel, thus helping fewer people. So I just updated the code of ethics on my website. If you want to take a look at them, there's a link down in the description. Needless to say, this is going to be a big loss of income for the channel. Last year, we made 5 figures from integrations. But you know what? It's the right thing to do, and I need to do it. So I'm going to. With that said, if you believe in the work that I'm doing here and you want to help support this show, you can make a pledge on Ko-Fi or Patreon. There are links below for that. It's all greatly appreciated, but no matter what, whether you've been a subscriber for a day, a year, or you've been along for the entire ride, thank you. Here's to another 10 years.